A homeless woman saves a hurt child, but she has no clue the boy's billionaire father is watching and plotting something that could rewrite her destiny. Why did this mysterious man cancel his security detail that day? And why was she the one person his son ran to? In the city that never cares, one unexpected moment is about to flip the script on everything. Blood streamed down the boy's shin as his sniffles echoed along the cold, indifferent sidewalk. People rushed past, eyes averted, ears closed, just another whimper drowned in the New York orchestra of horns, heels, and hustle. But to Malia, that cry sliced through the noise like a blade. Hunger had chewed on her for 2 days straight, but this sound? It bit deeper. "Hey there, champ. Mind if I take a look?" Malia approached the boy, brushing off the skeptical glances from passers-by. Her weathered, dark fingers gently touched the boy's pale knee, a striking contrast as she inspected the swelling. With smooth, practiced motion, she pulled out a crisp white napkin, oddly pristine for someone who barely owned socks, and pressed it gently to the scrape. That napkin, traded 2 nights ago for her only meal, now became a bandage. Just across the street, Damien Everhart, worth over $700 million on paper and probably more in ego, stood frozen, gripping his designer briefcase like it was a grenade. His son had darted ahead, face planted on the sidewalk, and now a stranger, a homeless woman, had her hands on him. Instinct screamed at him to act, but something stilled him. Was it the woman's care? Or the strange peace on his son's face? "What's the mission, soldier?" Malia asked, looping the boy's frayed shoelace. "Wanted to see those crazy birds fighting," he replied, nodding at a flock of pigeons going wee over breadcrumbs. "I'm Theo." Malia smiled, and despite sleeping more under bridges than roofs, her grin could have sold toothpaste. "Nice to meet you, Theo. I'm Malia." Damien didn't move. Normally, his bodyguards would have tackled anyone who so much as breathed near his kid, but today, for once, he'd dismissed his entourage. He just wanted a quiet day alone with Theo. After 3 months of closing mega deals across 6 countries, now this wasn't the quiet he expected. "All done," Malia said, tapping Theo's knee. "No major damage, but next time, maybe let the birds win." She winked. Theo giggled, then tilted his head. "Why are you so messy?" The air tightened. Damien winced, but Malia just nodded, unfazed. "Because not everyone rolls a lucky dice, kiddo," she said. "Sometimes life pulls the rug home, job, people all gone. But the one thing no one can take? Your humanity. Don't ever forget that." Her words smacked Damien like a slap to the soul. Just a month ago, in a boardroom with overpriced wine, he'd argued that homelessness was a choice, and feeding them just prolongs laziness. And now, he was watching a woman with literally nothing offer her cleanest possession to help his son. Malia stood, discreetly wiping a tear from her cheek. Her belly let out a monstrous growl, loud enough for Theo to hear. She'd skipped the shelter's last dinner to trade for that napkin after hearing rumors of an infection sweeping through the facilities. "Dad!" Theo suddenly lit up and sprinted toward Damien. "That lady helped me." Damien stepped forward, awkward in his usually bulletproof composure. Malia was already retreating, instinctively backing away, like she'd seen this play out before, like she already knew the ending. "Wait!" Damien called out. But she was gone, melted into the crowd like a whisper in a storm. "She's hungry," Theo whispered, tugging his father's sleeve. Her tummy was talking. That night, as rain smashed down over Manhattan, Malia curled up beneath a crumbling loading dock, imagining a life she almost had, the one that slipped away when an interview panel 3 years ago said she wasn't the right fit. One of those panelists now beamed down from a giant billboard, hailed as Montgomery and Vale's new VP of Diversity. Cute. What she didn't know was that, at that exact moment, Damien Everhart had launched a search for her using every tool in his arsenal. Not just money, but something rarer in men like him. Guilt. Real, unsettling guilt. And a fire to redeem himself before the shame hollowed him out. If this strange twist of fate, this quiet battle between cruelty and compassion has struck something in you, stay with us. Because this spark, it's about to ignite something massive. something not even Manhattan's kingmakers saw coming. 3 days passed. Malia got sucker-punched again. The shelter she occasionally crashed at was closed for emergency maintenance, which, in rich people code, meant clear out the poor before the gala. "You've got 20 minutes to move it," barked a cop, eyes deadpan, wristwatch gleaming. "But where do we go?" asked an elderly woman beside Malia. "Not my problem," he replied, already texting someone more important. "The nearest shelter? 10 kilometers. With nothing but a ragged backpack, 2 shirts, a bent toothbrush, a nearly dead diary, and a cheap makeup kit she used for interviews that never called back, Malia prepared to move again. That's when she felt a tap on her shoulder. It was Travis, a tired-eyed but kind-hearted social worker who'd been around the shelter forever. "Malia," he said, holding up a card, "Fresh Ground Initiative is hiring people with street experience. They pay. You'd be a great fit." Malia narrowed her eyes. "Why me?" "Because you've got something rare," Travis said. "Grace under pressure. And because I saw your resume that time you applied to." He didn't finish the sentence. She already knew. Degree in business, solid HR background, and 3 years in corporate trenches before everything unraveled, Travis said. The next morning, soaked from an unforgiving downpour, Malia stepped into the pristine lobby of the Fresh Ground Initiative. Her soggy boots squeaked shamefully against the polished marble floors. The receptionist, more interested in her manicure than guests, barely looked up. "Lost?" she asked flatly. "I'm here about the Job Fresh Ground Initiative. Travis Dorsey sent me." The receptionist's face twisted, like she'd just smelled something rotten. "Are you sure this is where you're supposed to be?" Then a new voice cut in, crisp and unwavering. "She's exactly where she's meant to be." Eliza Wren, the Foundation's executive director, stepped forward with poise sharp enough to slice paper. Her tailored blazer gleamed under the fluorescent lights. No hesitation. She extended her hand with firm purpose. Her office was refreshingly simple, none of the corporate gloss that screamed, "Look how charitable we are," while bleeding resources dry. "Our goal isn't just shelter and soup," Eliza said, cutting to the chase. "We want to unmask the gears that grind people into the streets." Their talk was interrupted when Travis entered, carrying a folder thick enough to crush hope. "Just wrapped up my dive into Everhart Global Holdings." The name landed like thunder. Damien Everhart, the father of the boy she'd helped. Billionaire, per darling, claims to be a humanitarian, Eliza explained. "But his urban renewal projects have displaced thousands. We're preparing a campaign to highlight the gap between his public speeches and private deals." Malia sat stiff. Fate really had a twisted sense of humor. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked, wary. "Because we need someone fluent in both worlds, the boardroom and the back alley. Someone who can speak truth and make it land like a punch." What she didn't say, she already knew Damien. His son, Theo, still lived in her memory like sunlight through storm clouds. But something told her to keep that card close. Weeks passed. Malia collected testimonies from those booted out by Everhart's expansion projects. Patterns emerged. Odd coincidences. A black SUV that kept tailing her. The subtle sense that she was being tracked. Meanwhile, in a penthouse surrounded by rare art and imported silence, Damien read reports about the foundation that had quietly put his company under the microscope. His comfort waned. In the next room, Theo kept pestering him. "Did you find the scarf lady yet, Daddy?" "Not yet, little man, but I'm trying." During her digging, Malia spotted a familiar name in a personnel document. Bryce Langston, Everhart's current director of diversity and inclusion. 3 years ago, he had dismissed her with a polished smile and the words, "You don't quite match our company culture." Since then, he'd been busy building a paper-thin facade of progressiveness, while insiders whispered about his habit of blocking qualified minority candidates from real positions of power. Her tattered journal, which once served as a place to vent, had become something else. A data mine. Dates, faces, veiled insults from interviews. Dozens of subtle red flags, coded language, and systemic barriers. Now, with the Foundation's help, those scribbles were crystallizing into a weapon. And as Damien continued his hunt for the woman who stirred something human in him, Malia was assembling a dossier that could dismantle his empire. Sometimes, the most dangerous opponent isn't the loudest. It's the one who's already lost everything. Everhart Global's annual Inclusion Summit was, according to Malia, the Academy Awards of Corporate Hypocrisy, a grand theater of equality staged for cameras and stockholders. In a plush auditorium under banners that screamed, "Innovation through Inclusion," hundreds of executives clapped as Bryce Langston strutted on stage. As Director of Diversity, he announced, "I'm proud to share that minority hiring is up 75% in the past year." Behind him, sleek slides told a perfectly curated story. In the back row, unnoticed and quiet, Malia sat with a discreet recorder provided by the Ramiko Foundation. Her presence, orchestrated by Eliza through careful alliances, was the result of weeks of planning. Damien Everhart stood off stage, arms crossed, face unreadable. Since reconnecting with Theo, something inside him had shifted. The investigation into Malia had unveiled more than expected, not just about her past, but about the rot in his own operations. "And now," Bryce continued, "we'd like to welcome our partner organizations for a panel on inclusive leadership." Malia exhaled slowly and walked toward the stage, alongside 3 other representatives. When Bryce caught sight of her, his mouth froze mid-smile. Only someone expecting the crack in his facade would have noticed. "Welcome," he said, voice taut. "Let's begin with introductions." When it was Malia's turn to speak, she rose with composed determination. "My name is Malia Carter. 3 years ago, I applied for a position in this company's HR department." A tight silence gripped the room. This wasn't part of the script. Her tone didn't waver. "At the time, Mr. Langston told me I didn't reflect the company's image." Chairs shuffled, eyes averted. 3 months later, I lost my apartment. 6 months later, I was sleeping under scaffolding. Bryce Langston cleared his throat nervously. Perhaps we're drifting from the topic. On the streets, Malia pressed on without pause. "I began documenting the stories of others like me. Skilled professionals, mostly Black and Latino, turned away for not fitting into corporate culture." From his seat, Damien Everhart straightened, heart pounding. That voice, the woman, this was her. The woman who had bandaged his son's knee. The one he'd been searching for. "While Everhart Global parades its inclusion," Malia continued, calmly pressing a button on her phone, "its inner circle speaks in a different dialect entirely." Behind her, the screen lit up. A video played. Bryce Langston, chuckling at an internal meeting. "Of course we need color in the brochures, but the boardroom? Not so much." Another clip followed. "Sure, meet the quota on the bottom floors. But let's keep the strategy seats undiluted. You know what I mean." The crowd shifted. Murmurs rose like steam. That's been edited," Langston stammered, taken completely out of context. "I have full recordings," Malia replied, her voice razor-sharp, "and documents showing that under your leadership, 89% of qualified Black candidates were dismissed using the same vague excuse I was given." Now the screen showed emails, internal reviews, patterns of bias laid bare. Damien stood abruptly and walked toward the stage with deliberate, heavy steps. Langston, now visibly sweating, glanced from Malia to his employer like a man on a collapsing bridge. "Mr. Everhart, this is clearly a smear attempt." Damien raised his hand. The microphone caught every syllable. "As CEO of Everhart Global, I take full responsibility, not just for procedural failures, but for moral ones." The auditorium froze. Damien Everhart never admitted fault. Ever. "Miss Carter," he said, locking eyes with her, "today you've demonstrated real courage and the kind of integrity we only pretend to reward." Langston edged backward, trying to fade out. Damien caught his arm. "Effective immediately, Bryce Langston is relieved of his duties. And as of tomorrow, we launch a full audit of all hiring and advancement decisions." Then, more quietly, he turned back to Malia. "I owe you more than an apology. I'd like to speak privately, if you're willing." Backstage, amid the chaos that followed the conference's implosion, Damien found her calmly collecting her notes. "Noah asks about you every day," he said simply. Malia blinked. How did you? He insists you're the scarf lady, the one who saved him. That scarf? I've seen it a dozen times in his drawings. I've been trying to find you ever since. In the weeks that followed, Everhart Global underwent a tectonic shift. Executives ousted, departments restructured, policies rewritten. Few saw the deeper irony. The man who had built an empire preaching performance finally understood that true merit wasn't wrapped in resumes or tailored suits. It was weathered, tested, and born in survival. But what even fewer could have predicted was the ripple effect. That confrontation created a change not only in company policy or Malia's fate, but in the very soul of a man who, for the first time in decades, saw the world beyond his bulletproof office. And still, one question lingered like smoke. What would happen when Theo learned the woman he idolized wasn't just his hero, but the one who transformed his father's empire? 6 months later, Forbes published a story that exploded across social media. The Everhart Shift: How One Homeless Woman Rebuilt a Corporate Giant. The first time I saw Malia, Damien said in the interview, she was kneeling on a sidewalk, helping my son, while I just stood there. To the world I represented, she was invisible. Today, she's the most powerful voice at our decision-making table. Their new initiative, built on the very grounds where Malia's old shelter had once been shut down, now provided job training, housing, and guaranteed employment for the most vulnerable. At Theo's insistence, the project was named Handkerchief House after the napkin Malia had used to tend his scraped knee. Over 200 people had already re-entered the workforce through the program. More were on the way. Meanwhile, Bryce Langston faced a storm of lawsuits from former employees and interviewees, those discarded for who they were, not what they brought. His fall from corporate grace was swift. No major company would touch him. His career, dead on arrival. And in a final twist drenched in irony, poetic, public, and permanent, the woman he once said didn't fit the image had now become the face of the new one. In a twist almost too ironic for fiction, Bryce Langston now found himself jobless hunting through the very job platforms he once gatekept. The same algorithm he'd used to quietly filter out undesirables now ranked him low on credibility. Bias doesn't just damage morale, Malia Carter said in a TED Talk that would shatter viral records. It robs companies of brilliance before it even walks in the door. Every time we reject potential based on skin, struggle, or story, we kill our own future. The partnership between the Ramiko Foundation and Everhart Global became a case study at Ivy League business schools. Eliza Wren, now a permanent advisor on Everhart's board, often laughed. They tried to buy us off to stay quiet. Instead, we bought their conscience, and it's worth more than they ever knew. One golden autumn afternoon, while attending the ribbon cutting of a new community space, Malia received an unexpected message. A woman in the program wrote, "You probably don't remember me, but 3 years ago, in a shelter, you gave me the last piece of your sandwich. You said I needed it more than you. I never forgot that. Today, I get my second chance." The ripple of that kindness tossed out during Malia's own darkest days now echoed in lives she never imagined touching. At home, yes, a real home, Malia kept a small frame beside her bed. Inside, the white napkin she'd once pressed to Theo's bloody knee. Now washed, folded, and enshrined like a battle medal. Theo, now the unofficial youth liaison for Project Handkerchief, often joined her on visits to the support centers. "When I grow up," he told her one day, eyes wide, "I want to help people like you do." "You already do," she replied, smiling. "Really? How?" "By seeing the people the world looks past." Damien Everhart, watching them from a few steps back, was struck by how a single moment, the one in which he'd hesitated to intervene, had become the pivot of not just his story, but thousands. "There's one lesson this entire journey taught me," he shared at a gala that raised millions for low-income housing. "Privilege isn't just what you're given, it's what you've never been forced to question. I spent decades building walls around my wealth. What I should have been building were bridges." But the most powerful change wasn't in his press releases, it was in the details. Damien now knew every janitor's name. Theo shared his lunch with kids from shelters. And Malia, once armed only with a journal of pain, now carried a master plan to undo the very systems that nearly erased her. People ask me if I feel like I won, Malia said during an interview. But this was never a fight. It was a correction. The real win isn't tearing others down, it's turning former opponents into partners. The story of a woman who rose from sidewalk shadows to boardroom spotlight traveled far beyond New York. In classrooms and corporate halls, the Malia effect became shorthand for a new kind of diversity, not as a box to check, but as a strategy to survive and a principle to lead by. On her one-year anniversary at Everhart Global, Malia received a modest box from Damien and Theo. Inside was a spotless white handkerchief. The note read, "For your next beginning." Her eyes welled. It wasn't just a token, it was a symbol that everything had changed, but nothing about her kindness needed to. Because real revolutions start small, with eye contact, with listening, with kneeling beside a wounded child when everyone else walks by. That night, overlooking the skyline of a city that once shut its doors on her, Malia finally understood what justice really meant. It wasn't about retribution. It was about redesign. About shaping a world where injustice has fewer cracks to hide in and more mirrors reflecting accountability. And as Manhattan's lights shimmered like tiny promises in the dark, one truth stood tall above the concrete. Sometimes, the most radical act isn't to burn the empire down but to rebuild it from the inside, using nothing more than dignity, vision, and a borrowed handkerchief. If this story sparked something in your heart, if it made you believe in the ripple effect of small, forgotten acts, don't forget to subscribe. Because out there, tucked into the corners society ignores, are the blueprints for a better world. And the best revenge against an unjust system is to remake it in your image.